Hello and welcome to another episode of Last Week in Localization. This is actually a very special episode that should be called This Week in Localization, because today we are talking about some news that are fresh off the bat. And I have a very special guest with me today as well, and that is Josh Gould, CEO of The Big Word.
Nice to see you again, Sarah, and thank you for having me on what you call a special version of your show. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I mean, the show usually airs on Monday and we kind of review what happened the week before, but I made an exception for you because you have big news. But before we get to those, maybe just for those who don't know you as well as I do, because at this stage you and I feel like we go way back. We've talked many times. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am the CEO of the Big Word Group, father of two, sailing legend, and but what I do most of the day is work with my Big Word family. So that gives you a bit of an insight to myself. And the Big Word, if you're not familiar with us, we are one of the largest LSPs in the world, top 20. And we have over 500 people working for us around the world. And we are headquartered out of the UK, where I'm sitting today. And normally I'm speaking to you from New York, but where I live. But today I'm in unsurprisingly grey and gloomy England, but I'm not feeling grey and gloomy.
Well, that's good. All right. So the title is already giving it away, what we're talking about. And that is that the Big Word just sold its majority stake. In your own words, tell us what happened.
Well, we have been bootstrapping the company for the best part of 41 years now. And we've built this magnificent management team. We've been building, and I think a lot of people know, we built the WordSync app. And, this is what we call internally, and our clients call, a multilingual communication tool. And we've put in tens of millions of dollars. And the Gould family has been one of the longest serving investors in the language industry and one of the largest investors. But what our dream is that the WordSync app becomes the de facto multilingual communication tool. We want it to become what Google is to search. And for that, we knew that we needed a partner. And we knew that we needed some type of partner, a partner that would bring patient capital, that could back the management team, that could get behind the strategy, and that also understood the public sector, because about 60% of our revenue is public sector. So that's not you would think that would be easy to find, but there's not very much patient capital in the money markets. And we were approached by Susquehanna, or Susquehanna Private Capital, and we immediately clicked. And I'm not sure if you're married or, but
I am actually happily.
Yes, so you know what that moment's like when you're on a first date or a second date. Maybe it took you a little longer, and you realize this is probably the one.
I do recall.
And that was about. Yeah, and that was about 4 or 5 months ago. And we've been working really hard to get this deal over the line. And I'm really delighted today to share the news, but also not work on the deal anymore and go back to, 100% focus on the business. So thank you for having us on and giving us the opportunity to share the news. And I think it's great news for the whole industry, by the way, because this is a big American investor, a huge company. Their parent company has tens of billions of dollars in management, and they're recognizing the industry as an exciting place to put their money. And they're investing outside of the US as well, because, the Big Word Group is headquartered in the UK. And I think that's a big shift in what we've seen historically.
Absolutely. And I want to come back to this later. I actually have this as one of my questions, or talking points. But before we get to that, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the process of finding an investor and like finding the right partner. Like, how do you choose the right investor? Because I know when we talked as well, you said you've been approached by different companies. But how did you find the right one? Or what is the process anyway that an LSP has to go through when it comes to finding an investor?
Listen, I liken it to getting married before, and it is like that. There are always people who want to invest money in good businesses, and you have to first of all decide what you want. Just like when you're dating, you have an idea of what you want, and as you start to date, you find that maybe what you want isn't exactly what you want, and so you have to start to formulate your view on what is good for the business and what is good for the people within the business, what is good for the industry, what is good for the linguists, most importantly, that we rely on every single day. And so that's the first part of the process, is decide what you want. And then for the big word, and I can only tell you for the big word, we did have people approach us every single day. I'm sure most of them were, just emailing everyone on a database. But I would say at least 2-3 times a week, we had a genuine and serious approach from someone in the industry or private equity predominantly. I would regularly meet with them just to see what they had to say and to figure things out. But we didn't run a process like a lot of companies do, which, if you're not familiar with the process, it's essentially like a silent auction where you go with a banker and the banker puts it out to 100 pre-approved people and they all put in their offers, and then you get whittled down and they say best and final. We didn't do that. There's nothing wrong with that, but we wanted to be a lot more careful about the relationship before we decided to jump into bed and get married. So that's the process, really. And people keep asking me, was it different because of COVID? And I think ultimately, of course, you're utilizing different technology than you may have pre-COVID.
Yeah.
But in reality, there's no difference. These investors that invest in our industry, and certainly Susquehanna, they're very professional. They know exactly what they need, what they're looking for, what they want to achieve. And, and I really enjoyed the process. People keep saying, oh, it's not for the faint-hearted. I bet you liked it. I bet it was hell. I enjoyed, 95% of it. And the other 5% wasn't all that bad. It was just, just nerve-wracking. And, and Susquehanna flew despite COVID, sat in quarantines if they needed to do so, got to know our management. They visited us in the UK and the US. And I visited them in the Middle East as well, in one of their offices. And, they took their time, getting to know us. So, I'm really proud to work with partners like that.
So it sounds like it is a fairly lengthy process. Like you said in the beginning, you were approached by different companies and you had conversations, but it didn't work out. Then eventually you clicked with SPC Global. And then the whole process started with several meetups and going through the whole process together. And talk to me a little bit as well about the role of advisors, because, Nimdzi worked with your investors. Did you have visibility on that? Did you know that they were getting outside help? What was that like?
Yes, I think it's important that you can trust the people that you're trying to create a deal with and ultimately own a business with and operate on behalf of. So I only have my own experience to go by, but our advisors, shared what we were doing, and they were very careful because at the end of the day, they knew that they're going to own the majority of this at the end of the process. So they wanted the best for us even before that was the case. In terms of advisors, there's different types of advisors, and I think on our closing call there was probably 30 different advisors on the line. So this process is not a cheap process, in any way, not at our size, and it typically costs millions of dollars to do. So, but the role of advisors for us was, we found each other. There was no matchmaker, no Tinder of the the M&A world that we were swiping left and right on. But we did hire advisors. We hired BDO once we were engaged, to assist us and walk us through. I'm an operator of a company. I'm not a banker, and I would advise your viewers to always work with advisors, even if you think it's expensive. Not necessarily because they'll get you more money, but you've got a much higher chance of completing but more than anything, it's a lonely position to be in. I mean, you're under NDAs. You can't speak to anyone unless they're an affiliate and an advisor. And, maybe some of your viewers are on their 10th company that they've sold, and that's a bit different. But you need someone to walk you through the process and to look out for you. And having a middleman, if you like, or a middle woman, we have both on us. Then you also can give them the difficult discussions. So that if you're asking for something they may not like, or vice versa, by the way, then it softens the blow a bit and it makes it less personal. I have to say we didn't really need that in the end with Susquehanna. It was a great relationship from day one. But I know that that's been good in the past for us as we've done our own acquisitions historically. And then Nimdzi was part of the due diligence team. I hope I'm allowed to say, hired by Susquehanna, and probably we were the most scared of you because there's no wool going to be pulled over your eyes, and and I have to say, I was pretty nervous about having Nimdzi involved. Nothing wrong with Nimdzi, but I knew you speak to our competitors regularly, and you're very well connected in the industry. But in the end, it was an incredibly confidential process. Nimdzi carried out, what I would consider a very extensive set of interviews and reporting. And actually, I think it strengthened our relationship with Nimdzi because we really just saw, what a great outfit you guys are. And I say this, by the way, not as a paying customer.
Yes, that's true. And this is good to point out as well. So thank you very much. I'm glad you found it enjoyable and useful as well in the end, and that maybe the outcome wasn't so scary as what you were afraid of in the beginning. Well,
it's only day one, by the way.
Yes, true. But you were saying as well there that people have told you, this is not for the faint-hearted, doing something like this, but that you found it quite enjoyable. And I mean, just knowing from what we've done as well with the SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat, of course, that's basically, other people weeding through your business and pointing out what's going well, what could be improved, things like that. And like you said, we weren't the only ones involved. So would you say something like that, as painful as it might be sometimes when someone also points out what might be, an area for improvement, that ultimately that is something that can move your business forward as well? Is that why it was an enjoyable experience? Or
yeah, 100%. You find out. I know my business so much better than I did pre the process. I've looked at the business through so many different eyes, and I would say our business is infinitely stronger as a result. I mean, you've got the Nimdzi SWOT, and it's never nice to hear something bad about yourself. Or bad about your company. And it doesn't matter if it's constructive or not, it feels the same. But at the end of the day, you get used to hearing this. And if you're hearing it from people who want the best for you, and you can really trust that they're not just trying to, reduce your price or damage your confidence. And I had that with Nimdzi. I had it with Susquehanna and the other advisors that Susquehanna brought on board. for themselves. And now we've taken all of that information. And I have to say, our clients, by the way, were part of the process. We brought our biggest clients along, and we heard, from them. So, we've made a lot of changes in the business in the 6 months of the process that we've gone through. And I think it's a more formidable business as a result.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk about some of those changes that you've either already made or something you have coming up now that the deal has closed?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. The way we run our feedback from clients and the way we document and report it, the financial information. We run a full C-suite even before the deal. We have a large finance team, but the way you cut information, the way it gets analyzed, and the speed of which that happens and then flows throughout the business is infinitely better. The way you understand the market and how you fit into the market, and because most companies look at the market through their own eyes, they don't look at it from other people's eyes and other people's point of view, and every company has misconceptions about how the world sees them. So we got all of that information, and my team, and I have a wonderful management team who are all very excited about this, and they've been fully backed by Susquehanna, have got used to taking this information and reacting with immediately on the information that they've been receiving. So it's you get used to working at a different speed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see. And I just had a question there on the tip of my tongue, but it escaped me. But it doesn't matter. I have a million more, so that's okay. I actually, and I hope you don't mind me asking, and you can decline as well, but I realize I don't know the size of the investment. Is that confidential, or is that something you can tell us?
Yeah, we decided along with Susquehanna to keep the valuation metrics and the size of the deal confidential. But I would say, we are both very happy with it.
Okay, good. Because you should be saying that it is a very costly process that costs millions. I assume it must be worth it then in the end.
Let's all hope so, right?
Exactly. Okay. So then you talked about some of the plans already that you have, but is there anything more specific that you have coming up in the immediate future? I know you always, we've spoken a lot about WordSync, your platform, but what about, like going abroad more, your geographic reach? Are there any plans in the pipeline?
Yeah, we are a market leader in Europe. We're one of the largest interpreting providers in Europe. We're also a major translation provider. And we have a US presence and we have a good US business. But we realize that, 50% of the revenue, tens of billions of dollars, reside in the US, and our market share there is way too small. So we will grow our focus in the US. We're still looking to grow it in Europe and Asia, but US will be a larger focus of the business moving forward, and we'll look to do that organically, but also inorganically. Mm-hmm. So that's one area. But we also want to speed up the development. WordSync is underwritten by a lot of AI and machine learning, and you get to a point, when you have a piece of software like that, where it's very hard to compete with, because you need the data to compete, and it's the amount of data that you collect. So I think with the investment and the ecosystem of Susquehanna, working with our team here and our R&D center, where I'm actually sat in at the moment, we're going to be able to bring out products much quicker and speed up our existing roadmap.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And then something to come back to that you already mentioned earlier. We talked about the whole process now and what it means for the big word, but let's expand our view a little bit and talk about the industry. about the industry impact. We've seen so much investment and mergers and acquisitions in the last while. And the trend you already pointed out is that, or something interesting about this, and that my colleagues from Multilingual, they interviewed you about this yesterday as well. Here's the article on Multilingual. And they also wrote about the fact that there's a new trend in the language and technology sector, and that is a shift of capital from the US to other countries, particularly in the EU and other parts of Europe. Because previously it was more that the money was going into the US. Now it's also that the private equity firms in the US are investing abroad. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, look at who are the biggest spenders in the industry. I mean, every single, in every single geolocation, the biggest spenders are government. And the European governments have a lot of laws that require them to essentially translate and interpret in order to communicate with the populations of those countries. So and where there are contracts, there are companies to service them, and where there are companies to service them, eventually there will be investment. But that's happened very slowly in our industry, surprisingly. And but now you're starting to see people wake up. And I used to say the names of all the tech companies we work with, because that was a big turn on for whoever I was talking to in the pub or the local bar. And now I tell them, all of our government clients, and I think that actually they're equally as excited about them. And I always say the governments are great clients. They don't go bankrupt, or at least not the ones we work with. They pay on time, and they play the volume game. One thing I would say, though, is we have a great private sector business, and that is growing very fast, especially in the tech space and in the e-commerce space. And what we've done is we've used best practices amongst each different industry and pre-programmed them into the WordSync application, so that when WordSync automatically generates an ideal workflow for our client, they're actually, without even knowing it, they're utilizing these best practices.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Something else that was mentioned also in the article from Multilingual, since we're talking about WordSync here and technology again, is of course this trend that we've seen for a long time, and that is more this blending of technology and human service in our industry. And I know you are working a lot on increasing efficiencies, I want to say, with WordSync and automating what can be automated. So how do you see the future of the industry there?
Yeah, first of all, I think that there'll always be room in our industry for the linguists. And I think there'll always be a necessary part of what we at The Big Word do. But I think the computer-aided translation is real, and it's a lot more than a workbench and some translation memory. We see, and under WordSync, you can, if we take translation as the example, we can split a document up. We use nested translation memories and machine translation, and we are splitting it and figuring out which segment, is the cheapest and best way to do it. Now, what does that look like as a linguist? It means that you have to be multifunctional. But actually, our linguists are not being paid less than they were 10 years ago when they were doing 2,000 words a day. And many of them can do 15,000 words a day today. Wow, okay. And they're not having to work, 3 times harder, 4 times harder or 5 times harder, but they are having to work with the tools. So it's becoming quite a technical job from a tool perspective. So I see that continuing and that trend continuing. We think machine translation is very exciting because there's a whole, I always tell people that the world's content almost doubles every single year. And we've actually paid a lot of money to get this research. And, so why is the language industry not doubling? Because really we translate % of the world's content. And that percent should, in theory, be flat, but it's not. And the reason is there's not an ROI for a lot of that content, despite nearly all content. I mean, you could write anything. I just got a nice burger. you put it on Twitter, that has commercial value to an advertiser. Because first of all, they can advertise on the tweet, and second of all, they know you like burgers.
Yes.
So they want to understand it, and they want to interact with you. So all content has value, but can you get an ROI? And that's really where machine translation comes in. On the interpreting side, WordSync does include machine interpreting, and it's not a voiceover of machine translation, because we don't speak in the way we don't speak in the way we talk. It also is in transcription. So the industry needs to become more of a multilingual communication business than anything else. And then you're going to get two different types of companies. You're going to get the companies like The Big Word, who are in the lang tech side. I like that phrase. I keep using it, but just language technology side. And then you're going to get the people who are in the pure service side. And, and I think they're complementary to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's actually a few things I want to pick up on here. First thing about the content creation, you're absolutely right. We're continuously creating more content, especially ever since basically the internet democratized access to information. And there's more and more content also coming out in languages that are not English, because still a big portion of the internet is in English. And especially we can expect to see a lot more, like really an explosion of content once 5G has been widely implemented. I mean, there's still a way to go there, but once that happens, and it'll be even easier to stream content as well, I think we can expect a lot more content and a lot more work and growth for the language industry. But of course, you're right. Also, part of the job is to, highlight why people should translate and make language accessible, and that this is of course all about the end users and reaching people who are the actual consumers and making more of that. As far as machine interpreting goes as well, this has personally surprised me a lot in the last years, and I've seen your demonstration as well, which was really great, I have to say. Because I'm an interpreter by trade, or I'm a trained interpreter, I should say. And I always thought as well, I don't know if we're ready yet. Machine translation is really good, but language, like spoken language, is less perfect and it's less predictable, and it's just kind of harder to deal with. And it is not perfect yet, but it has come a long way.
It's very expensive. It's very, very expensive to procure the spoken word or interpreting. If you think about it compared to translation, it's a huge investment, for people who use it. So we don't see machine interpreting replacing the humans
no, me neither.
in any way, and not even in the same way as translation, because you can segment a document and utilize different tools. You can't segment a conversation that's happening in live.
Anyway,
but we do think that when you check into a hotel, if there isn't a speaker of that language that you need to speak, then you could talk into an iPad and with the WordSync app on, and you're not going to get a perfect interpretation, but you are going to be able to check into the hotel, and you're going to be able to ask where the nearest Chinese is, or the best Italian in the area is, and the receptionist, a real live person, is going to be able to respond back. And same if you go into a hospital or or any other building that's public.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's so many cases, because when we talk about this sometimes in the interpreting community as well, people just tend to think of the perfect scenario and how things should be. But then there are so many cases where there's no interpreting yet at all. So there is not even a case to be made about whether it's going to replace humans or not, because there is zero interpreting for now. But there's many scenarios where it's better to have some communication, even if it's imperfect, than having no communication. I personally ended up in the ER in Spain once, and nobody spoke English. And I have a little bit of Spanish, but and I was so out of it, I didn't really care anymore at that point. But it would have been helpful to have at least some communication, even if it was just a device that would give me a few extra words of what the doctors were talking about, So, and of course, later.
That's right. Yeah, and you can tune machine interpreting for the medical setting as an example. But what we're also trying to do in WordSync is blur the barriers of different spoken services. And I don't like to use interpreting and translation because only the industry uses those words.
Yes.
Our client say spoken or written.
Mm-hmm.
But, in our WordSync platform, you can press a button and go from a machine interpreting to a telephone interpreter or a video interpreter. So it actually feeds demand for human interpreting.
And we've seen more of those on the market, those kinds of solutions in the last while, where you have the option for both. You can start out with the machine, and if you need extra help, you can request a human as well. I can see more demand for that. Something else I wanted to come back to, and we briefly talked about the geographic reach, and that it ties in also with the internet is still very English dominated. And funnily enough, I think our industry, even though we are the language industry and we advertise multilingualism, we are still very dominated by the English language as well. Of course, on the one hand, more people speak English, so in the industry we speak English with each other, sure. That's an argument to be made. But at the same time, we should also advertise more for multilingualism. And that also comes to when we think about our workflows, because in most cases, either the source language or the target language has English, or you go through English, especially when we translate into Asian languages. There's often still English in the middle. And I mean, you lose a lot there as well, right? And I know there are more companies now that go also from an Asian language to another Asian language. It's just an example now. But I think you mentioned you wanted to do more in that area as well, right?
Yeah. From a translation point of view, I think there are a lot of companies that are good at that. It's not the norm. It's not the standard practice, as you mentioned. But I think if that is your goal, you can do that, and you can. I think in interpreting, it's nearly impossible. There are a few companies that do it, but they do it for very specific contracts. So, the interpreting industry is primarily into or out of English, whereas you can't say that for the translation industry. It might be one of the biggest. Yeah, you could say it's the biggest language by far, but at a wild guess, 99.99% of all interpreting has English either as the source or target language, depending on who you are, obviously. And there are companies now that have come up and, mainly European companies who offer a non-english source or target. Probably wrong words to use in the interpreting world. And we just won a contract, a really big contract actually, where there's no English in this in one side, unless it happens to be an English user that needs English, but the majority of it doesn't include any English. And we're seeing countries start to become more proud of their languages and insist those languages are spoken. And I don't speak any language, embarrassingly. I'm horrible at languages. I failed all my school. I was bottom of the class anyway, but certainly in languages, they didn't even let me do languages after a while. That being said, I have a real respect for each country's language because it's part of their culture. Yeah, and if you take English away, and I was having this conversation with a big Israeli technology company, a huge multi-billion. I was talking to the CEO of it, and he was saying, I need you to train our team in English. Can the big word do that? So I said, but what's made you so successful is your culture. And if you bring my language into your business and you enforce that, you will also bring the culture with it. You will start to lose that. So we actually encourage our clients to utilize their language. Now, they always say there's a big problem that my own teams can't communicate with each other. And we see this in our office in India, where there's so many languages that are spoken as mother tongue in India. They just say, okay, screw it, let's speak English to each other. And I make a big effort when they're in Pune. So I make a big effort when I'm there to speak Marathi, and the guy who runs it for us says, Josh, everyone speaks in English. Half the team don't even speak Marathi. So I said, I know, but it's about respect.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's the other part. When you speak someone's language and you go to the effort of doing so, it's huge respect to them. Now there is a world where you can get your emails translated really easily. and you can put on there it was machine translated. Please excuse the odd error. But I'm always shocked when I use WordSync myself to speak to my mother-in-law, and we have full conversations with machine interpreting, and she'll give me recipes to all her Yemenite dishes, and her family from Yemen, and it is unbelievable, and it's changed our relationships. I can say it from personal, personally, I've seen it in action.
Absolutely, and it makes such a big difference. On the one hand, like you said, it's the cultural side that is massive in language. And also, I mean, if you're not really a native speaker or you haven't lived in a country for a very long time, you also miss so much. You can't get past a certain barrier. You miss the little jokes and wordplays that your friends make or like the client makes, and you cannot bond as closely. So yeah, and I agree. I mean, we're not as lucky that we are fluent in every single language, and that's why there are language services. But it's still, I think it makes a big difference, like you said, to show respect by even trying and also valuing the other language, because often I find there's a bit too much. I don't know how to say this without sounding very negative, but there's a big English dominance, and I use English every day. I speak English with my husband as well. So I don't mean this negatively. I like the English language a lot, but we should not. I'm starting to also be more proud of the German language that is very hated by many people. Nobody likes German really, and most of all the Germans. But I'm starting to embrace it again.
I studied German for 4 years, and the only thing I remember is "Das ist nicht gut," because it was always written on my homework.
Oh, that's so sad. I was going to say, that's very negative. It's a very negative takeaway.
But I wish I could speak German. I mean, look, there are a lot of German speakers. Germany is a huge country. Yes. Look how many Spanish speakers there are in the world, and there's 600 million Hindu speakers. Yeah. There's billions of well, it's not billions, sorry, there's over 1 billion people who are speaking simplified Chinese, and and if you want to win their hearts and minds, you have to speak to these people in their own language, and the investment's not that big when you consider the market size.
Yeah, and especially as everyone these days has a mobile phone and access to the internet, people want to consume content in their own language. And that's also where our study, I don't know if you're familiar with it, our Project Underwear, we call it, that looks into buying behavior of the end users, basically, the end consumers. It's based on a theory by one of our founders, Renato Beninato, who said that it doesn't get much more personal than language. So that basically when you're at your most private, let's say sitting around in your underwear at home, on your laptop, browsing the internet, on your phone or whatever, you want to consume content in your own language. You might be comfortable speaking another language, let's say English, in a business context all day long. But when you get home, you just want to relax and, switch off and consume it in your own language that speaks to your heart.
Listen, that happens in my own home. My wife speaks to my kids at dinner while I'm sat there in Hebrew. Yeah. And I tell her, I don't understand a word of what you're saying. Can you not speak English? And she says, I want to be able to speak to my own kids after, she runs her own business. I want to be able to sit down and speak with my own kids in my own language without having to translate everything in my head. And she's lived the majority of her life in the US. She's an American citizen. She speaks better English than me, but nevertheless, I did read some research in Nimdzi and in other areas as well, where you're more likely to buy in your own language. And yes. I totally get that.
Because you tend to, if you search for something on the internet as well, right? I would search in German usually, right? And so what pops up first is websites that are in German as well, right? So, I mean, that's not the only reason, because also, again, it connects closely to you when you have something in your own language that connects to your culture. But also, even starting at something like search engine optimization, you want to make sure it's in the right language so you reach people in that specific market.
Yeah, look, we've all traveled. I spent my life on a plane, even in COVID days. And you're in the middle of nowhere. I remember I was in the desert somewhere, or not the desert, so the jungle in Botswana, and I didn't hear anyone speaking English. And then I heard these people speak English in one of the tents near me, and I ran over and I just wanted a conversation with him. And the thing is, everyone could speak English that I was with in our little camp, but it was different because it wasn't the English I craved; it was the fact that I felt connected to them.
Mm-hmm.
So when you speak the same language, you actually feel connected.
Yeah.
And I knew they were making an effort, these other people, to speak to me. So when a brand translates something, it feels like the brand is going to the effort to make it no effort for you, even if you can speak the language of the brand.
Exactly. Usually when people have the choice, even if they speak, let's say, English well, then friends of mine here, they would choose the German version of the website because it is still easier, it's still more convenient. Or if you have like a big report about your medical results, you might understand it in English, but you don't understand it as detailed in English as you would in German. And you want it to be detailed, especially if it's very important. Yeah, but to the point of your wife as well, I just want to add, since I have a little daughter, and like I said, my husband is Irish and he speaks English to her and I speak German to her because it's also very important to us that we raise her with both languages and both cultures. And I also feel like it would be very sad if I couldn't speak to my own child in my own language because it's just
it would be sad, but again, you bring up your child in a world where we accept different cultures and we embrace them, and also you're changing the brain to be able to learn to speak two languages. I mean, I learned to read Hebrew as a kid. No one taught me to speak it, so I can read it. I have no idea what I'm reading. I know what sounds they make. And my kids play with me all the time, saying, "Daddy, can you read this?" And and it's usually too rude to say on your live show.
Fair enough. Okay, wow. We completely drifted off from the original topic, but I love this kind of stuff when we go a little bit more in depth and just have a bit of a conversation about the industry and about what it is we're trying to do as well, I think. And again, it shows the massive potential that there is out there as well. You were saying how many millions of speakers or billions sometimes of this language or this language are out there. Well, then it's time to tap into that market, because that also means, that sounds very bad now because I don't want it to sound like it's all about profit. Then again, we are talking about investment, so there is money involved. But
it is about profit.
Exactly.
You translate for profit. No one, I mean, governments do it because they want to help their societies, and in turn their societies work and pay taxes. And if you're a private sector company, it is about profit. Yeah. You want to sell more, right? And
nobody is in
CMOs, CMOs know this very well, but it's hard to convince because there's a lot, like any investment, there's often a lag and it takes time, and it's hard for them to convince their colleagues.
Yeah, no, it definitely, of course, it is about money and profit for the companies that are in it, but it also adds value, I think, truly, by, for example, like you said, providing a level of respect as well to the end users in the end, or, just to show that other cultures and other languages matter, and that it is not all about English as much as we love the language.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you all speak English, because otherwise I probably wouldn't be able to speak to anyone.
Well, then you would know what it's like growing up in mainland Europe. And, here I'm from the west of Germany and would drive 40 minutes and I'd be in a country where nobody speaks my language. But it makes you a little bit braver, I think, sometimes.
Well, I do know, because I travel to a lot of countries and I spend a lot of money on big word interpreters because, I've frequently find myself in places where they don't speak English, or I don't want the message to get lost in translation.
Exactly. I see we have a comment there. It's actually very tiny for me to read, even though I'm already wearing my glasses. 1 second. I need to check this out more closely.
I would read it for you, but it's blurry on my screen.
It's also for you. Okay, 1 second. We can figure this out from here. Oh, this is actually from one of my colleagues, a little bit of an advertisement for Nimdzi, saying that we provide essential insights, for example, how buyers prefer to buy in their own language. That is true. Thank you, Christopher. Glad to see that you're watching. Does anyone else out there who's watching maybe have a comment for Josh? I'm going to keep the conversation going for another few minutes just so you have a chance to pose a question. If not, I'm sure you can comment afterwards and maybe tag Josh, or maybe you can answer any questions that people have then. Otherwise, I know you're a very busy person, so I don't want to keep you for too much longer. I've already taken up a lot of your time. Josh, is there anything we haven't talked about yet that is something you still want to highlight about the new partnership with SPC Global and what's next for the Big Word?
No, nothing in particular. But if you are running an LSP and you're watching and you want to contact me, please. The best way to always get me is on LinkedIn, and if you search for Joshua Gould, the Big Word, I will come up. And I like to have LinkedIn friends, so just befriend me and email me through the platform, or email me directly if you got my email. The new partnership has given us the ability to have these type of conversations, and we're looking for like-minded partners here. If you understand WordSync and you think that your client base can benefit from it, I'm also happy to have a conversation about partnershiping. And it's one of the things, Sarah, and this is nothing to do with the deal itself, but the industry hasn't been a very friendly industry at the higher level. I mean, linguists are very friendly with each other. LSPs have not historically, and they don't work very nicely together. And that has changed over time. But when I became CEO a couple of years ago of the Big Word, I was previously CEO of a defense company that, as the Big Word happened to own, that was run separately. And we worked all the time with our competition. We bid against them, and sometimes we were teaming with them on bids. And I spent a lot of time trying to convince the industry we need to work together. At the top level, at the LSP level, we need to partner with each other for a number of reasons. First of all, it's good for business, it's good for the industry, but also we all do different things better than others. And so if you want to take the absolute ultimate product to market, you need to work with people in your industry. Mm-hmm. And so we've done that, and I can't remember what NDAs I signed yesterday, so never mind 3 days ago and 3 years ago. So I don't want to say who they are, but I can tell you there are top LSPs, top 20 LSPs that we send work to and receive work to, and we work together. And if that's of interest to anyone, and partnerships have to be give and take, but they have to be neutral. But please, again, contact me on LinkedIn. I live for the industry. It's my passion. It's not just the business I'm in. And I care deeply about it. So, please don't be a stranger.
Nice. I think that wraps it up very well. Like you said, it needs to be a mutual partnership, like in a good marriage, bringing it back around to your opening statement as well. So, someone saying greetings from Puerto Rico. Hello, greetings from Germany. Okay, I don't see any other comments right now. So, thank you so much, Josh. We almost made it to the full hour now, so I have taken up a lot of your time. I really appreciate that you took the time to talk to me about this. Super exciting, and congratulations again on the new investment, on the partnership with SPC Global. And keep us in the loop on what's next.
Thanks. I look forward to breaking some news at some point with you again in the future.
Perfect. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.